8 people, and we're based in Montreal, so we're a very small studio. Now, Contrasted is our first game. It is set in the 1920s in a film noir inspired story. And as you said, you play the imaginary friend of a little girl. Fire away. Yep. It's okay. Yep. About 5 minutes into the game. That's the basic ability. You can shift in and out of your shadow. That's an ability you use. And if you want to, you can just fall right off the edge of this, and you'll land in 3D. And then you can jump up there again. It's much easier. That's the real core ability at the heart of Contrast. And that's what came first. Originally, we came up with this idea, this mechanic, built a few prototypes, and slowly the world sort of coalesced around over time. Now, as I said, we're about 5 minutes into the game at this point. What we know is that Dee Dee lives at home with her mother, Kat, and their father, or Dee Dee's father, left the family for some reason. We also know that Kat is a cabaret singer, and she has performed all over town, but tonight is her very first big show at the Ghost Note Cabaret. And it's obviously a very big deal to her. She's left Dee Dee at home in bed, but Dee Dee, after promising not to go out, has snuck out her bedroom window and climbed down the beach. And of course she's taken Dawn, her imaginary friend. Going to the gameplay for a second here, we really wanted to create a type of gameplay that was very, very fluid. So we wanted you to be able to choose when to go in and out of shadows. We didn't want to force you in and create a very scripted environment. And as you can see, it's mainly used as a method of traversal. So we needed to get across to this balcony. We couldn't get there any other way except to go through shadows. If you take a look down here, basically where Dawn is facing towards the lights, you see that there is actually a bike down there. If you want to jump in and go closer, that's fine. And the bike is reflected in the world. So the idea is that the 3D objects and scenery create these shadows of the world that you then need to use to move to different parts of the world. We are, as I'm sure you can tell, we're set in a very European, early 20th century place. Architecturally, inside, I'll recommend. Thanks. Before we go inside, we're going to take a little bit of a look around here. So the world is very German expressionism and a combination of deco. The world is a bit of a hodgepodge because we really liked elements from the 20s and the elements from the 40s. And so we blended a lot of things that we liked to create this distinct visual style. You'll also see here that we're not in the safest of places, so this is very much the red light district of the city. Which should give you some hints that Contrast is a fairly adult game with some fairly adult themes. Now that doesn't mean there's lots of gore and death and stuff like that. It's more that the adult themes we deal with mostly hinted at and introduced, but the world is seen through the eyes of Tina. So it's very much this kind of idyllic, innocent place, yet it's filled with all of these things that we usually associate with adult environments. And you'll see here that things aren't quite ordinary either. So we just wanted to show you this a little bit to give you a hint that there's a little bit more to the world of the story than just what's going on with Dini's parents. But by and large, at its heart, that's what the story is about. It's about a little girl trying to figure out some rough stuff with her family. In many ways, it's like Pan's Labyrinth, in the sense that this imaginary friend was created to help Dini work through some things in her life that aren't that great. So, back to you. What you would have heard, you guys, without the music at this point, is that the world is, in this part of the world, is very, very jazz oriented. So you would have heard some vibrant music in the streets playing through, which we do a little bit more of throughout the game. But right now we've come into the cabaret and it's all roughly quiet. You could hear a lady whispering to you, saying, "Hey, can you turn on the lights because we can't play without them." Now, when introducing new things that you can do in Contrast, we wanted to make sure that everything was set in context. So one of the big things you can do is manipulate light sources in the game. And you can move the light all over the place. So wherever you move the light here, you can shift into shadows. But what we wanted to do with this point was teach the player that lights sometimes need to be placed at certain points to activate things. So in this case, getting the spotlights on the band activate both the music. So every time you add a new spotlight, a new performer is added to the music. And additionally, it forms the basis for the first puzzle in the game. It's a super simple puzzle because people are really still getting used to the game at this point. It's the idea that upstairs there is a broken light, which is what's flickering now. And there's no way to get up. So, of course, people need to use their shadow powers and go up through one of the different routes here. Okay. Now, just before you start this final spotlight, because it's going to trigger a performance, the music in Contrast is completely recorded, completely original from Contrast. And we in particular have collaborated with a few artists to create performances like this, which we composed completely for and recorded for Contrast. You may want to put your headphones on because it's quite cool. You okay? Oh, it's fine. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not been long. Little different time, yeah. So, for those of you listening, this is a performance by Laura Ellis, who is a Los Angeles-based jazz singer. We actually used one of her songs for our original teaser trailer. And people loved it so much that we said, "Oh, Laura, do you want to work with us on the game?" And she's recorded a couple of tracks that we use in the game. At this point, what might not be obvious is that was Kat, that was Dee Dee's mum, performing the cabaret at that point. And we've actually been introduced to Kat previously in the game, but obviously not in the demo just yet. Before we go through the shining bright light at the end of the tunnel, okay, we'll go there right now. Never mind, there's a great cutscene for you guys. Tell you what, take that off your hands for a second because I want to show you something here as well. But for the moment I'm going to look at this really interesting wall so as to not distract you from my lovely speaking voice. So obviously you'll see that we tell stories through shadow as well, and that's for a number of reasons. The film noir influence in the game was really, we chose that because it works so well with shadows. Film noir tells so many stories through shadows. And as we were thinking about it, we realized that's a really great way to A, stylize the narrative and tell things in a different way. B, it creates this different world where you can only see Dawn and Dee Dee. And obviously, we're going to ask you guys to think about that and draw your own conclusions as you play through the game. But finally, it's actually, for a studio such as ours, we have 8 people. We have 1 animator, so to try and create a game of this size with this complexity of animation is difficult. It requires a lot of time. So doing this meant we can focus on creating fluid motion that we needed or wanted, but also keep it stylized so that we didn't have to have multiple animators with the project. And obviously, it's really hard to do that in any other context than an indie development. So the game is set in 3 acts, and the first act we saw just a brief snippet at before, and that was set in the streets, which is pretty cool. So that's where the Ghost Note Cabaret was and the cinema. But at this point, we've shifted environments, and we're now in a giant circus. The idea being Dee Dee's dad Johnny has organized the circus. And he's trying to do this really properly and super legit to try and look after the family. But things aren't going completely according to plan, and Johnny's actually in trouble with some pretty bad people. And so Dee Dee needs to help fix the circus and make it a great success so that Johnny doesn't get hurt. Obviously that's a pretty dark storyline. But the way we tell it in the story is from Dee Dee's perspective. So, of course, she's worried about things, but she doesn't really understand how serious it is. In the game, in these 3 acts, you have basically a central area like this that you can go to certain places in the game to undertake certain missions. So, one of the first missions you do in this act is to look at this giant pirate ship here, which of course is pretty larger than life, as is the moon, both of which, can loom fairly large in a child's imagination. And the pirate ship ride is not working, so you need to go inside and fix it. There are a couple of side puzzles that you can do in this area as well, and you can collect little luminaries, which are the bright glowing balls of light that can be used either to turn on certain things in the environment, or alternatively, they're really just to encourage exploration. There is another area over here that you will see that is a wooded area with a theatre in it. We're not going to show you that today. And then finally there is this carousel, which you would have seen from the latest trailer. any one of you wants to have a go, see how you do on this section. It's a more platforming part of the game. We really wanted to vary the play style and what you're actually doing in game frequently, so you're not just always solving puzzles. Sometimes you're platforming, sometimes the platforming is pretty straightforward, but you're doing it for other reasons. So I'll show you a bit of that just after this. The voice actress for Dee Dee, which you obviously need the headphones to hear, she's actually 9 years old, so we got her to come in. She's written, she's done a lot of, she's done a couple of projects before. I can't announce who she is, but she's really, really very talented. And she basically sounds just like a 9-year-old girl, as you can expect. And she's great. And I think it gives Dee Dee a real personality. And so, for example, she bends down and apologizes for getting in your way there. So the purpose of this is that everything in the 3D world is reflected in the 2D. So these are the horses on the side of the carousel. We also introduced here a new ability, just like that. And this is really obviously a timing challenge. And this ability just allows you to, basically it shifts you out of shadow just briefly, and then shifts you back into shadow, meaning that you can skip over really small things. This is probably pretty unfair, and I think a bit mean, because this is roughly halfway through the game, so people have had more time to get used to the shadow powers at this point. Now, at this point here, obviously you can't continue any further through a shadow. If you try and go through shadows or dash through here, it won't work, so unless you want general frustration.
You have to jump and to merge with the shadow.
Exactly, so the challenge here is to get people thinking in 2D and 3D at the same time. Mostly because we've been encouraging people to think in 2D for so long that they're all getting used to thinking in the 3D space. Sometimes Dee Dee isn't always a hindrance, and she can be a help as well. So she's holding up a stick there to help you get across. And so that is the first half of that level. We're going to skip and go to another part of the game at this point. And basically, what I wanted to show with this next bit is this kind of area that's not necessarily particularly challenging, but this idea that we really wanted this section to be really powerful, and we wanted people to be able to experience the narrative. We thought, well, we've got this shadow ability, we can walk on shadows, and we tell story through shadows, so what about we do this? So we've actually got the silhouettes of two people here having a conversation on the wall, and you need to use these shadows to get across to the balcony over on the far side. And obviously this is you can see Kat's actually adjusting her stockings, so there have been some things going on here that Dee Dee doesn't really understand. So we sort of hinted those things. So we explore these adult themes, such as the idea of what it means to be a father, and really passionate, difficult relationships, and what it's like to be actually in those. But we do that, and we review them by going through a child's eyes. So at this point, I'm actually going to stop us there. Mostly because at this point in the game there's something happens that we think is really a really lovely moment. Well, it's kind of a lovely moment, it's kind of a bad moment. But anyway, it's really powerful, and we don't want to spoil that for you guys. So yeah. So in terms of the more mechanical aspects of the game, we're coming out on 4 platforms. So That's the PC, the PS3, the PS4, and the Xbox 360. And we're also planning to come out around about the time of the PS4 launch. We don't have a date just yet, mostly because we just found out about the launch date now, so if that had been a month earlier, it might have been a struggle. But that's the aim, so we'll hopefully have a decision on that fairly shortly. And then on price points, we're talking $15 for the game. We will have a collector's edition with a digital art book and digital soundtrack for roughly $20. And then we may also have a retail collector's edition available in Europe. But we're not sure on that yet. That's a hopefully we'll get that sorted, but obviously we'll make sure we can actually do it in time. And then finally, the game in a normal playthrough is roughly 4 to